I drove that woman to madness. I stripped her of what made her human, until there was nothing left but grief and silence. And like a wounded animal, she withered and died. I didn't ask myself if it was right or wrong. I didn't weigh the consequences or question my actions. I treated her the way people treat livestock on the edge of the property, disposable, forgettable, beneath concern. I did it to win affection. I did it because I was young, angry, and cruel in a way I didn't understand yet. I told myself I was only raising a suspicion, but I knew what I was doing. I planted the seed in my mother's mind, and when it bloomed into punishment, I let her take all the blame. That's how I cleared my own conscience, by hiding behind hers. I don't even know if I grieved my father's death. We didn't get along, but I remember the way my mother cried for him, days and nights, quietly, like a widow from some old tragedy, and I hated that. I hated how much she loved a man I never felt close to. So I started picking him apart in front of her, pointing out flaws, imagining betrayals. She always defended him at first, until I gave her a story too strong to ignore. There was a girl on our property, Cecilia. She worked in the kitchen, kept to herself. She was soft-spoken, maybe 20, maybe younger, and Hispanic, which already made her a subject of whispers in our town. She lived in a small house near the edge of our land, a place my father had arranged for her to stay. That alone would have been enough for talk. But the day after we buried him, Cecilia's belly spoke louder than anything. She was pregnant. She said it wasn't his, but she didn't say whose it was. She just looked away and kept her voice low. That silence was all I needed. I told my mother it made sense, that maybe he'd kept secrets from her. I said it in a tone that suggested I didn't want to believe it, and let her do the rest. When my mother said Cecilia had to go, I stopped her. Not because I wanted to protect the girl, but because I had another idea. Why not raise the baby ourselves? Take her in, give her our name, cleanse my father's shame by giving the child a proper home. My mother didn't take long to agree. She even said my father would have approved, that this was our way of redeeming the family name. We let Cecilia stay in that little shack by the trees. We sent food now and then, always through someone else, never directly. She was no longer part of our lives, just a womb we tolerated from a distance. The day after the baby was born, we showed up, took the child without asking. Cecilia cried, begged, clung to her daughter with all the strength she had left. My mother didn't flinch, just told her to rest, recover, and disappear. I didn't feel guilt. Not then. Not when I saw Cecilia collapse on the floor. Not when she screamed our names. She was background noise in a story I thought belonged to us. She didn't leave, though. Not really. She stayed in the woods, like a shadow. I saw her sometimes, near the house, peering through cracks, trying to see the girl. I told the men to scare her off. I told them to make her understand she had no place here anymore. Cecilia began to disappear long before she died. She stopped speaking, stopped showing her face. People said she was living off scraps, sleeping in the woods like some lost thing. She became less a person and more a ghost that haunted the edge of our land. She didn't scream anymore. She watched. Then winter came, and with it some sickness that got into her lungs. One night she crawled back into the shack. That's where she died, alone. I won't lie. Her death brought a strange relief, one less reminder of what we'd done. But Grace, she changed. She grew quiet, distant, still sweet, still gentle, but withdrawn, like she carried something inside her that none of us could reach. My mother never tried to love her. She fed her, clothed her, but never touched her hair or kissed her cheek. To her, Grace was a symbol, a prize, proof that she'd won. And me? I thought I'd be admired for my nobility, for stepping in to correct my father's shame. But my mother never looked at me the same way again. Not with pride, not with love. Grace's sadness became something I couldn't ignore. It wasn't loud or dramatic, more like a stone in your boot. Small, but always there, hurting every step. She never asked questions, but her eyes did, and I had no answers I was willing to give. I never told my mother I made it all up, that it was me who suggested the baby might be my father's. I wanted to. God knows I wanted to. God knows I wanted to, especially when I saw how cold she was to Grace. But I stayed silent. Cowardice can wear 1,000 faces. Mine looked like obedience. I tried to get closer to Grace. Maybe I thought I could redeem myself by being kind. I'd help her feed the animals, sit near her on the porch, tell her small stories. She never pushed me away, but she didn't say much either, just stared with those wide, questioning eyes. That's when the dream started. Cecilia, crying in the dark, not screaming anymore, just that quiet, choked sobbing. Then people began to talk. They said they heard weeping in the woods, said the old shack was haunted. My mother laughed, said fools hear what they deserve. I stopped going near the shack, but the sounds, they followed me, and I started to believe that maybe I was one of those fools. Our lives dragged on, dull and dusty, for 5 or 6 more years. My mother kept threatening to send Grace to some boarding school upstate, but she never did. I thought of leaving many times, thought I could outrun the memories, but they clung to the house, the land, the very air. That afternoon, the sky turned a strange shade of gray, the kind that makes animals nervous. I was in the barn when I heard her crying, not Grace, but Cecilia, her sobs, somewhere between the wood and the wind. I ran back to the house, blaming the storm for my nerves. When the rain eased, I asked Grace to go fetch some tools I'd left by the fence. Minutes later, she came back limping, blood trailing down her leg. 2 small punctures, snakebite. I rang the old bell to call the neighbors, but no one knew what to do. The road was too wet for a car. There was no choice. I saddled my horse and rode out into the storm. Lightning flashed through the hills, lighting my path in violent bursts. I rode hard, barely thinking, just pushing forward. I reached a neighboring farm. They had antivenom, some painkillers, a promise that she might survive if I hurried. I turned back without rest, but the road had become a river of mud and shadows. Somewhere in the dark, my horse reared. I fell. My head hit something, a rock, I think, then nothing. I don't know how long I was out. Time didn't feel real anymore. When I opened my eyes, it was morning, or something like it. But the light was wrong. Pale, heavy, like the sky had gone dull behind a curtain. My body ached, my head throbbed, but I could breathe. I could feel pain. So I told myself I was still alive, that the fall had knocked me senseless, that the strangeness was just confusion. I looked for the horse. Gone. But the bag of medicine was still there. That meant something, I thought. That meant I had a job to finish. I started walking, slowly, heavily. The road looked familiar at first, then changed. Trees I didn't recognize, fences where none should be. The world shifted like it was breathing without rhythm. I kept going, even when it made no sense. Grace needed the medicine. I had to get home. But the day ended, and I hadn't moved. The path folded in on itself. Every turn led me back to where I'd started. My feet blistered, my hands cracked. I slept in a clearing that night, or tried to. The bushes hissed like snakes. Shadows writhed in the corners of my eyes. I curled up, afraid to blink. That was my first night in that place, and every night after felt just like it. Before the sun fully rose, I set out again. The mist rolled low and thick, swirling like smoke in the trees. I told myself the world was just fogged over, that the storm had left everything strange. Then I saw her. A figure crouched on the road, maybe 30 yards ahead. A woman. My heart leapt. The first soul I'd seen in what felt like days. I called out, ran toward her. But the mist surged up, fast and dense. When it cleared, she was gone. I stood there, shaking. The wind rose, branches creaked like bones, and under it all, I heard it again. That crying. Cecilia's crying. I ran. No direction, just away. But there was no away. Only the same twisted loops, the same false roads, the same silence. My clothes tore, my feet bled, my mind frayed. I saw the horse once, grazing in a field, like none of this had happened. I called out. It turned, then bolted, like it didn't know me, or didn't want to. And still, the crying, sometimes far, sometimes close. I screamed back, told her I didn't mean for any of this, told her I only wanted to save Grace. I dropped to my knees and wept. I begged her to help me find the way back. I said I was sorry. I said I deserved whatever came next. That's when I heard the footsteps behind me, the swish of a dress in the wind. I turned. Cecilia stood there, eyes full of sorrow, and something else, mercy. She didn't speak at first, just reached out her hand. I took it. My fingers trembled inside hers, but she held on. I leaned on her like someone half alive. She guided me off the road, through trees and silence, until the woods opened to reveal the old shack. Her shack. It looked just as I remembered. Maybe more fragile. Maybe I was the one who had changed. She opened the door and helped me lie down. The bed was small. The air smelled of dust and memory. I slept. A lot. Woke up sometimes. Saw her sitting by the window. She never spoke about the past. Never blamed me. Just brought water to my lips. Kept the fire low. One day, I tried to speak. Tried to tell her Grace was in danger. She touched my chin, lifted my eyes to hers. "You're dead," she said. "You can't help her anymore." She walked to the door, pulled aside the curtain, and there she was. Grace, still a child, just as she was, standing in the doorway, hands folded, eyes wide, but calm. She smiled at me, not in judgment, just a soft, quiet smile. Cecilia held her hand, turned to me once more. "You have to forgive yourself," she said. "We already have." Then, like smoke, they faded from the room, and I was alone again. I don't remember how long I stayed in that bed. Days didn't mean much. Time was a rumor here. Cecilia never said goodbye. Neither did Grace. They just faded, like morning fog, rising into nothing. I stood up, walked out of that little house. It looked smaller now. Empty, but not cold. I followed the old trail back to the farmhouse. Our land was overgrown, the windows broken, the rooms hollow, everything abandoned, just like me. I stayed, not because I was trapped, but because I couldn't walk away. I couldn't forgive myself. Not yet. So I lingered, a ghost walking among the bones of his own cruelty. hoping one day to hear her voice again and finally believe I'm worthy of her smile.